treasure table and then half-size table or something like that. I don't remember exactly.
It was miniature.
Miniature, yeah. And she had that up at Richmond at the Atlanta conference last year. Too bad she couldn't bring it here this time, but flying don't do too well. Anyway, she was in a little treasure chest class I taught up at Tiller's, and I was assisting Travis Fleming at the folk school in a class making a Gothic candle stand. Most people made one. She had to make two. I got two sons, she said. So she had to make two. She's very competitive, and I don't know the details. She'll have to tell you about a contest she was in out in Arizona last year, and she won more than her share of the competition against these men farriers. She's a farrier, and she lives north, way north, just south of Canada. She's in love with a bridge. The bridge that crosses Mackinac Straits.
The Straits of Mackinac, yeah.
And she's gone inside that bridge to examine it, or wanting to go again. I think she's applied for a job for maintenance on that bridge. But Jennifer, glad she's here, and I think y'all will be entertained with what she does. Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. All right, thank you, Clay, very much. What an honor to be here. Clay is a huge mentor of mine, and how I found Clay is a little backstory to it. Is there's a young man in Michigan by the name of Derek Bliss, and Derek had brought one of Clay's tables that he had built with Clay, the occasional table, to an event, and I saw that, and I asked Derek, what is this? Where'd you learn to do this? And he told me about Clay, and I couldn't get to Clay fast enough after that. And I admire Derek, and I admire his work, and he's an influence on me. And one of the things I've learned is whenever you find somebody that they have the kind of work or the style that you enjoy, learn everything you can about them, and then learn everything you can about the people who influence them, and learn everything you can about the people who influence them. So, you know, I learned about Derek, and I learned about Clay, and Clay, of course, was inspired by Francis, and Francis is a huge mentor of mine as well. And unfortunately, I never even was interested in blacksmithing before Francis left here. So I encourage and I appreciate everyone who has already shared stories with me about Francis, but if you have stories, please share them with me, because it's the only way I get to Francis is through you guys and your stories. I really appreciate the fact that Francis encouraged the basic skills and understanding just basic skills and basic techniques, and you can take them in any direction that you go into, whether it's sculptural or jewelry or whatever. It's all the same stuff, just repeated into smaller or larger sizes, or the different sequence that you do it, or the different types of material that you do it with. And so I want to talk a lot about just basic skills and basic forging, and share with you some of the things that I do that I think, you know, when I'm preparing, I get all nervous. I'm like, this is just such simple stuff, but it's the stuff that I enjoy doing. And the part I enjoy about blacksmithing is I like swinging the hammer. It's enjoyable to me. That's why I was asking Seth, what do you like about filing? Because I could care less about filing. Like, why do you do that? You know? But we each are drawn to something, you know, and he's drawn to the filing and the detail work and perceived precision. My fiance is a machinist, and so he's always dialing things in and talking, you know, it's 2 and 750 thousandths, and I'm like, what? I'm gonna hit it with a hammer, you know. So one of the projects that I really enjoy sharing is this flower, and I put it on everything. I love it, and it was introduced to me by Derek Bliss, so I call it the Bliss Flower, and I think bliss is a fun, happy word, and it's appropriate for a flower. But that's why I call it the Bliss Flowers, because Derek Bliss introduced me to it. This is my storyboard for it, and I was just going to make a coat hook, It has some simple basic forging skills involved in it, and then I have something that I can leave here for your auction as well. So we'll start the demonstration with that part of it. And so when I'm laying out a coat hook or key hook, or whether you hang dog collars on it or whatever, I always try and find 16-inch centers if it's going to be something long enough to hit 2 studs, and then figure out my layout after that, or if the wall space. But keep in mind that 16-inch. So my 16 inches are marked, and so is my center marked, and then whatever, I can't remember what I left here, probably 2.5 inches. It's 2 7/8, whatever, close enough. And I'm going to just split this first to create a heart shape. And splitting is one of the basic skills: drawing, upsetting, welding, twisting, bending, maybe sinking. There's only a handful of things that we do to steel, and just depending on what order and what we do it to creates all these different projects. And you look around, and all those same techniques are in every project. So I could start off just by drawing this down to a point and then split it, but the problem with that is steel likes to move at the 1/3, 2/3 ratio is a happy place for steel to move, and this is not. It's wider and thinner. So if I split this in half, I get closer to that 1/3, 2/3 ratio, and it'll draw easier for me. So first thing we'll do is we're just going to heat this end, and I don't know, looks like I stayed about a 1/2 inch away from my mounting hole, and make a split in that. So while that's heating up, I wanted to share with you this, let's see, Steel Like an Artist. This is one of 2 books. The second one is called Show Your Work, and these are like super easy reading, because I fall asleep if I sit still. And leave this by your bathroom or whatnot. And where does creativity come from? It comes from our influences, and everybody that we're exposed to is an influence to us and has something that maybe we pick up an idea from. And so nothing is new. Everything has been done before, but whether I take that little bit I learned from Clay, and that little bit I learned from Victor, and something I learned from Tom, and then I incorporate those things together, now it appears to be something original because it's the influences on me. And so this is a really good book. And the second one, called Show Your Work, is talks more about promoting yourself. And I never ever considered myself an artist, but I'm learning to be an artist. And artists have to have some sort of a following, and you have to be able to promote yourself, which is something I struggle with. I don't like being in the limelight. This is an uncomfortable position for me, and I'm trying to learn to be an artist, to promote myself, and to be comfortable having a following, because you have to have a following in order to promote yourself and to promote your work. So both really good books. I'm right in the process of reading this one. I'm almost done. Real Artists Don't Starve, another really good book. And I am primarily make my income from shoeing horses, but as I get older and I'm slowing down and it's harder to get underneath horses, I knew right from farrier school, they told me your career is going to be short. Make sure you have a backup plan. And so I'm trying to implement my backup plan, that I'm starting to develop more income from blacksmith work and less from farrier work, and I can prolong my farrier career, because I make more money shoeing horses than I do blacksmithing, but I won't be able to do it forever. So if I can get that shift going, which I am, then hopefully by the time I'm done shoeing horses, I'll be able to keep a decent lifestyle with blacksmith work. So I am trying to be a professional. I am trying to earn an income from it, and so that's a lot of the purpose for the things that I do. I didn't get interested in blacksmithing until 2002. I started shoeing horses in 1990, and there's a voluntary testing process through the American Farriers Association that you can test your skills against a standard and become either a certified farrier, a certified tradesman, or a certified journeyman farrier. And it was through my journeyman testing that I was at the forge building shoe after shoe after shoe, and my mental head was just spent. And I thought, if I walk out of the shop surely my arms are going to fall right off my body. I'll lose my endurance. I'll have no stamina. I'm going to forget how to build a horseshoe. I can't leave the shop. So at that time, there was an article in one of our farrier publications that it was a one-page instructional to make a stake turner. And I read that, and I was like, well, all it is a square piece of stock with a twist on the end and a taper and a little hook and, you know, something to hang it from. And I thought, I'll build that. And then I can still keep working on efficiency and swinging the hammer and hammer control. And once I built that, I thought, well, if all I got to do is add one more step and make a split, I can make a fork. So then I did that. And then I was like, well, if I just add one more step, I could jump weld a spatula onto the end, then I'd have a three-piece set. So I did that. And then now I need something to hang it on the wall. And it's so addictive. Every time I achieve something, I thought, well, if I just do one more thing, or if I just did this different, and I like that exploration part of blacksmithing, of playing, more or less, trying stuff to see if you can get it to come out. And even if it doesn't come out the way I intended, I often learn something different that I can use in some other way.
Ready.
We're ready. Okay, so splitting. In order to find the center of the stock, you can, there's lots of different ways. Seth's way yesterday with the dividers, he scribed a line, and even if they didn't meet in the middle, you just separate those two lines that are closer together. It's easy to do. This is called a center finder, and the way you use that, is you hook it on your steel, twist it till it locks, and then you can scratch. It's got a hardened point in there, and you can scratch and find your center line. A crescent wrench on edge will work as well, but I use these things to train my eye, and then I want to rely on my ichrometer. Oh, and I know I don't look like a blacksmith until I put on my apron, so I'll put on my apron. Now I'm a blacksmith. So when I was reading, because I find it kind of interesting to learn all sorts of stuff about the industry, and they started wearing aprons because way back when blacksmiths have been around forever, right? They didn't have very good clothes. It was animal hair and things like that. It burned up really easy, so they wore aprons to protect themselves. So now we have much better clothes, and maybe not quite a requirement. But whenever I'm doing, I like to use the power wire wheel and polish my material before I finish it, and it does destroy your clothes, and you just get so dirty. So I always do wear my apron when I'm grinding and stuff like that. Thank you so much. So we're going to use a hot cut here. What do I do with it? Here it is. And I'll get crooked here. I use my hammer and set it, and I use it to rest my hot cut along. And when I move this tool along the steel, I'm only using this much of the tool, really. Just the edge is my cutting edge. I'd rather be this way. I guess I don't have a cutting plate. I usually throw a piece of aluminum on there. Aha. So cutting plate, I usually use aluminum. This is just mild steel, which is okay too. It's going to protect the anvil and only hurt my tool just a little bit. And as it cools off, it'll more or less fracture and split apart pretty easy. One thing I think about when I'm using a top tool is I like my tool and my hammer shaft to be in line, these things. Otherwise, you can go perpendicular this way. This way, I'm looking at this leading edge coming to me and just walking it along. And if I have a striker, I want him primarily to be the same way with his hammer. Thank you. We'll try it. It's a little beat up. It's a stud punch, and we punch holes in horseshoes in order to put a stud in there for traction devices, and punching is one of the other basic techniques.
Did you want that heat for the back?
Mm. Same spot, I'm just going to draw those out now. So I'm going to do a convenience bend one of those out of my way, and then I'm going to draw each one out to approximately 4 inches. Maybe it might have been just a little touch longer than that. And so to me, I'm a definition person. I need to know why, and I want it clearly explained black and white so I understand what in the heck are you talking about. And so what is a taper? It's a long, what do you call that? You know, the material is getting longer and thinner. I want to maintain the same thickness to the material, and I think it was in one of Francis's books I read that a taper should be 7 to 10 times in length that the stock is wide. And so that's something that I use as a guide, is I try and be in that area. Maybe that falls into the golden mean rule, which golden mean is the rule of Fibonacci, the mathematical Fibonacci, the sequence, the golden mean, golden spiral, and this is just a golden mean that everything in nature falls into the golden mean. If I measure the short end of my knuckle here, that's a little hard for me to do one-handed here, but then the other end falls into the next knuckle, and the same is true for horses, and this is where I kind of learned to use this and then found out it was something you guys are quite familiar with. Goes to the next one, and so if I measure that knuckle, then it goes to the next bone in my body, and you can continue to do that. If you Google like faces that fall into the golden mean, you find the most beautiful people, you know, and their nose is the right relationship to their eyes and their ears and all that sort of stuff. So anyways, thank you. This guy out of the way. Start drawing this one down. Because it's thin and wide still, it wants to tackle and fall in half, so I try and maintain it, keep it from tackling. I'll take another heat on it because I don't want to go to hell.
I got a question.
Yes.
How do you get away with working it so cold?
The question is, how do I get away with working it so cold? It's really not. I mean, it's cold, but there's a certain amount of, there's certain times where I want to take advantage of the resistance of cold, and there's certain times I want to take advantage of the mobility of hot too. And because this is thin, if it's too hot, it just folds in half, and then I'm not achieving what I want to achieve. Quite honored to have Francis Whitaker's personal fire tender tending my fire, and working in this shop is pinch. Thank you, sir. Getting a little bit distorted on me, try and bring it back. Okay, we're gonna go take one more heat and move on.
Same heat?
Yes,
One
yep,
different-
we'll do it one more time. I want to try and get those hearts to be the same size on both ends. I don't get overly particular about it because they are on opposite ends of something. It's hard for somebody to compare them, whether they're exactly the same or not. About my hammer is a 2-pound Justin rounding hammer, one side round, one side flat. My sledgehammer is the same way, and I don't know, maybe farriers are the only ones who make sledgehammers that way, but I like the shaft to be slender. If the handle is too big, then I have to grip it, and that wrecks everything in here and wrecks my hammer swing. If it's too small, same thing. So my shaft should be able to slide in and out of my hand all the time. It's loose, and I think about if I had a dowel through the handle and through my hand, that it really just pivots inside my hand, and I lift it up and then I just let it whip back down, and I'm not holding on to it, and I get more work done with the velocity of the swing than the weight of the hammer.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. I'm assuming this anvil piece is 4 inches. Yep, it is, so I should be pretty close. And I'll just kind of do a bend out of the way there. So it might be a little bit boring to watch me do the exact same thing now on the other side, but when I watch somebody do a repeat thing over and over and over again, one time I may be watching where their hammer blows are hitting the steel. One time I may be watching how high they lift the hammer. The higher I lift it, the more work I can get done out of it. I might watch their knees, whether they bounce down, get a little closer. Try not to bend over, try and use your knees, just like every other lifting or and thinking about forging posture. I was watching a lot of you guys last night in the contest, and you see a couple of them out here like this, and when you get somewhere they're doing this stuff, and that's hard on your body, and farrier work is hard enough on your body, and so we certainly always try and be conscientious about our forging posture. And if you keep your feet underneath your hips and your hips underneath your shoulders, I don't know if any of you ride horses, but I think about it like I'm riding my horse. You want to stay square in the saddle, keep my elbows in, and both tongues. If I get swinging my hammer out here, next thing you know, I can't even set a gallon of milk on the counter because it'll tear that up. Thank you, sir. What was that? Purified. Okay, nobody's asked the question yet. Tom, what's the question?
Why are you doing it not straight with the piece? Is that the question?
No, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, I just bent one out of the way so I could get at the other one.
Right.
I'm waiting for somebody to ask, why am I bouncing my hammer over here?
Rest and remediation.
Yes, I'm resting for one, and I'm not really swinging the hammer, it's just bouncing over here. And it gives me an opportunity to reevaluate where I'm going to hit next. I'm looking at my work. And the other thing is, if I'm swinging, like I just dropped that, it continues to bounce. If I push it, you know, I'm taking away some of the rebound out of it. So if it's just rebounding over there, it takes less effort for me to get it restarted again and back to swinging than if I stop, I've got to use more energy to lift the hammer back up again. I'm just checking into the rebound. And then I also hear that it keeps the devils away. And I'm all about that. Yeah, so why didn't I straighten it out? I can. I mean, if you want it straight and to work, there we go. It does make it a little easier with my smart arm. This is my smart arm. This is my dumb arm. This is nothing but a power hammer coming up and down. With the advantage that my power hammer can tilt my hammer and drop my hand and different things, which pushes the material in different ways as well. Just about there, I think. Could have got my split opened up a little bit farther. We'll take one more heat and then we'll move on.
Same leg
Yes, please.
for the back?
Yeah. Right. And you can bring the heat right up into that crack. That crack should actually be opened up a little bit. Yes.
I didn't pay attention, but are you using the flash eye the whole time?
Round.
Oh, you're using the round side?
Yeah, and I switch back and forth. The question was which side of the hammer I'm using. When I'm trying to draw, I'm using the round side of my hammer for drawing, and then when I planish, I switch it over to the flat side. I used to address my handles that indexed it, so I knew one side if it. I would make the hammer, the end of the hammer profile be more like that. And when I felt the skinny side in my knuckles, I knew I had one side of the hammer, and when I had the round side, I knew it had the other. But I got better where I could just tell by the feel of it, and certainly by the hammer blow that you leave. Somebody wrote Daisy on the forge there. That must be for me, right? So this is all the flat side of my hammer. Just trying to flatten things out, planish it a bit. I'm going to hit this one just a little bit here. Straighten this guy out. I can get a visual. They're pretty relatively close to each other. Now I want to open these up to a 90, and I'll use the corner of my anvil as a mark. Keep more in here, farther back on them, just so I can open those up to a 90. Please. Hearts and flowers, like blacksmiths are generally men, and they generally think about tools, and I don't know. I think you guys all think about tools all the time. I'm not a tool thinker. I like to build stuff, not tools so much. But
Isn't the bridge a tool?
What's that?
Isn't your bridge a tool?
My bridge. I'm going to talk about that bridge. Let me just, I'll wait till the next heat, but I'm going to talk about that bridge because I heard Clay saying something about, somebody repeated what Clay said about what is.
There's a picture of the bridge on her Facebook.
There's lots of them. There's lots of pictures of that amazing bridge. It's the Mackinac Bridge. It was at one point the world's longest suspension bridge, and it spans 5 miles of water and connects the lower peninsula to the upper peninsula. And they built it, it opened in November, I believe, 1957, and I've watched every documentary about building a bridge and life before the bridge when the ferry systems, which were steam ferries that ran vehicles and trains and whatnot back and forth across from our lower peninsula of Michigan to our upper peninsula of Michigan. And what those men did in that time period is just an amazing feat to me. I'm just absolutely in love with the work ethic and the men and the ironworkers who did that. So when the bridge had its 50th birthday party, I went to the party, and they had, you know, huge firework displays, and they had all sorts of museum memorabilia and whatnot. And I found a tent that had some of the workers in there, and these old fellas up there on the stage telling their personal story about their experience on the bridge. And I loved everything I can find about it. And there's only like 25 bridge tours that the bridge randomly draws and gives to nonprofits every year. And I always apply for the nonprofits I am part of to try and get those bridge tours, and I haven't gotten one yet. But I did attend a medical center fundraiser where there was a bridge tour in it, and I was able to win successfully through the auction. And what I paid, what I thought was a bargain, at $950 in order to go to the top of that bridge. It meant that much to me that I was like, I really want to do that. It is an incredible experience. So they always take everybody up on the south tower, because the top hatch where you climb up 558 feet above the water is like a half-inch bigger than the other hatch. And it's not very big. It's not as big as this Anvil. And so I went up last August, and shortly after that, I saw in my church paper that they had gotten one of the raffles, or one of the tours from the bridge giveaway or whatever. And so I went right down to the church office and bought myself $100 worth of tickets, and I won. So I'm like, I did twice. I'm going twice. So later this month, my youngest son is a little skinny beanpole, and my older son is a quite jolly good fella, and he won't fit. So I'm taking my younger son with me, and because they're doing bridge maintenance this year, the south tower is closed. They're painting it, and so we get to go up in the north tower. So I'm super excited. I get to go up in both towers. So along with that, part of what I learned in the Show Your Work, the part 2 book of this, was a lot about marketing. And one of the things it talks about is attaching yourself to something big. And I thought, well, that bridge is pretty freaking big. So I've attached myself to that bridge. And every time, and I cross it frequently, I do a lot of my farrier work is on the south side of the bridge for trolls. We call people who live under the bridge trolls. And so I go down there and work for some trolls, and every time I cross it, I snap a picture. Sometimes when I'm traveling to Mackinac Island, which is an island that is all horse driven, I have some clients out there. Sometimes the boat goes underneath the bridge for tourism, and I get some pictures of it there. When I fly out of my airport, it flies right by the bridge. So on my way here, I posted my airplane bridge picture. And every time somebody thinks about that bridge or hears about that bridge or sees something, they think of me. So that was my attachment to something larger than myself. So it's a marketing strategy, and I absolutely love the bridge. So. The bridge, okay. Well, the Mackinac Bridge should put me on their payroll then. And yeah, I've paid a lot of bridge fare crossing that bugger. So I'm just trying to open this guy up. And when I go on my motorcycle, I ride a Harley Davidson, not this year because I've been too busy doing this kind of stuff. But it's just a regular $4 fare. And with I have a little van, it's a $4 fare. When I take my shoeing rig, they classify me as commercial, and I have to pay $10 to cross it. So, you know, I've done my fair share. Open that up too much, just jabbering away. So I'm holding this parent piece at a 45 to the corner of my anvil, and using the sides of my anvil as a square. And that's going one way a little bit too much. Pay attention, Jennifer. Okay, so the way I'd been doing this is then I just go to the horn, and one thing that farriers do a lot is use and understand the horn, and blacksmiths I don't see using the horn nearly as much. And this is an incredible piece of tool to me. It's got just about everything you need in it if you can find it, you know. So this is a turning fork to me, where blacksmiths like to have a turning fork up here, and then they'll hammer around it. And what has been explained to me is that way they can see it, but I can see it here too, so I don't quite get that. And what I think about the horn, just a real light heat, I want to talk, I know I'm talking a lot, but you guys like talkers, right? Okay. The horn to me is, if I take a chalk and I draw a line right down the top of the horn, everything on this side of the horn is a turner, and everything on this side of the horn is straightening, and anything right on top, I'm actually forging and changing the dimension of the steel. So I push a horseshoe or whatever into the horn, and then I work in this, what I call, can you see this on there? In the sweet spot is the hammer blows that are right on the off side of that. And to me, that's my turning fork right there. The top is that pin, and I'm turning anything that does not contact the anvil. So as long as there's a space under there and I hit that sweet spot, give my material time to move there, and then I rotate till I have air again, hit my sweet spot again, steel moves, rotate my material, air, hit, contact, repeat. So this is my smart arm. This is the arm that's doing the turning, and this is nothing except a power hammer, just coming up and down and hitting it. I don't go chasing around here, and all this is terrible posture. How can you do anything like that? And preserve your body. So that's how I do my hearts, is because I'm real comfortable on the horn. But when I was packing, and I was packing for this is really difficult because 50 pounds adds up really fast. and I would have loved to have brought my tables. I did bring some photographs so that I could share that. And there's more in the power display, or the video, whatever, slideshow. But one thing I learned at one of Clay's classes was we were doing these where we would scroll the ends of these, and I don't know if it was a tool at the school or one you had brought or where the idea came from, but I had cheap old broken farrier tongs where I broke one of the jaws off, and I welded just a piece of pipe to the other, which makes a nice diameter scrolling tong, right? And I didn't have to throw away that tool. And when I was packing, I thought, man, I really like to show them this because it's so simple and it's so cool that I didn't have to I didn't have to throw it away and scrap it. I made it valuable, and this actually fit really good into that size heart. So I haven't tried it. I'll do one my way, and then I'll do the other one this way and see if it turns out. Thank you. So sweet spot just off the horn, tapping it, dropping my left hand, and normally I just keep progressing it down. And just off the hammer, I go until this guy just points at the other one. If I bring it all the way in, I can't really get the other guy around there yet. And then I thought, well, let's see if this will work. But if I hook it this way, might be difficult because it's on the flat, the hard way, instead of the easy way. So it might not work out that good. We'll try some heat on it. We'll heat this one. I'll try it, but it might be a fail. But it's okay to fail. Fail is learning the ways that don't work, and you need to know that too. So I do a lot of failing forward. And remember that.
Going back to, like you talking about blacksmithing, using a bending fork versus the horn, what kind of things do you feel like you've brought from your farrier background into the blacksmithing world that you see as a big advantage? Or things, maybe something that you're like,
Well, I feel like I'm a baby in the blacksmithing industry. I just got started, and I actually didn't even start taking classes until, oh gosh, it wasn't that long ago. Well, maybe 7 or 8 years ago was probably when I first took a blacksmithing class and started going. I was always a member of our local group, and I would read the publication, but I wouldn't go to their events. They were always so far away. And I was really reserving all of my continuing education money for my farrier industry. And what happened to my business was I finally graduated to the top of the ceiling in my area. Like, I don't like to toot my own horn, but there's nobody in my area that has as much education about horseshoeing than I do. And it got really hard for me to continue to sell more education to my customers. And so it was like over-insulating my house. You know, how much more can I put into my house and I'm not going to get the return from my investment? So that's when I stopped attending as many. I still continue on my education in the farrier side and started attending more of the blacksmith stuff. So definitely posture and hammer swing, hammer control, and use of the horn. I don't know what else I have to offer. Just a bunch of more ideas, really. And that's what I think we all are. And then in this book, you know, it talks about writers and actors and different people who would get together, J.R. Tolkien and all really, really successful people, and how their creativity came from their brainstorming and their networking with other people that do the same thing, and watching how one guy does it or another guy. And there's a place where you can use it. Maybe it's not every time, but every once in a while you're going to get to a spot where it's like, I bet the way John did that would be a better way, and you use it then. Thank you, sir. So, all right, I'll try this, but this might fail. We'll find out. That third hand thing. Yep, put it on there about right. Yeah, it's okay. Now, if I had some sort of a turning fork or leverage on here, I could do better with it, but that's not too terrible. So I still got to bring in my tip a little bit. So I don't know that that's easier than me just going ahead and and then when it gets where how do I get my hammer in there? Well, it might come, let's see, how do I do that? This way. And now I'm using the heel of my hammer to tuck in that tip. And looks like this side's a little straighter, that side's a little more open. Hit back here and straighten. That popped the end out. Okay, so not too bad. It's not too bad. We'll go with that because it's I'm sick of watching. Now, anytime you have a brand new piece of steel, I think it's really important that you knock all the factory edges off of it. What do you call that? Breaking the corners. And so even if it's flat steel, I break the corners, and I'm going to decorate with this with flowers. I try not to get it all gaudied up with too much stuff. But I do want to break the edges, so I'll just use the round side and make some little scallop marks along the edge. And this is a little crowded here, so I'm going to have to do it this way. But if I come to the edge of the anvil and I'm going to use the round face, I want to be able to have clearance for the rest of my hammer down the side of the anvil. If I try and do it here, I'm limited. I can only use this section of my hammer, otherwise I'm going to interface with the anvil face, right? Back. Okay, now I'm going to make the brave move of attempting to punch some holes in here. And it's brave because I asked Tom, hey Tom, you got that stud punch in your truck? So I've never used this tool, and examining it, it's not quite, I would like my tool to be flat with sort of a crisp edge to it so that I can drive the material down and then shear the slug out of the bottom, just like Seth did yesterday with his eye hole. So we'll try it and see what happens. We'll take a heat, maybe I should mark it first. I already forged some flowers to go on this, so you guys didn't have to watch me keep banging away. I like mocking stuff up. It doesn't matter how big it is. I want to pretend to assemble it and see where I'm at. I'm looking for equidistance, all that sort of good stuff. And if I had a silver tip pencil, I could just give myself a little mark. But my dad got me this thing. It's a little center punch, and it's got a spring in it, so you can stick it down in there. Doesn't make a huge mark, but snap, and it made me a little mark in the center of my, where I'm going to mark that. So that's kind of cool. And then center punch. It's here. It's here. When possible, I always try and work in the heaviest part of the anvil, the body.
Is that center punch round or square?
It's not a shape. It's mutilated. I mean, I tend to grind it to be round, but it's mutilated right now, so it's not a shape. Is it what? What? Oh yeah. It used to be a punch for making a square hole and a horseshoe, but it got beyond its life there, and so it became another tool. So here's a mark here. We'll punch that hole. We'll try to punch that hole. So this is probably I don't know, maybe S7, and mild steel attached to it, and a garden hose. I mean, this is a white garden hose, but you got chunks of garden hose that you are cutting off, and I can't throw nothing away. I fix my garden hoses. It's got lots of splices, and all those bits go to the shop then, and then become handles on tools. So.
I've noticed a very distinct, different style tools for.
Yeah, we use handles. Yeah. I don't know what's wrong with using a handle. It seems like a really good idea. So I can't tell you why. Maybe Clay or James or somebody could tell you, why don't blacksmiths use more handled tools? I mean, you do with your swages and.
More tools on the airplane without the handle.
I know. I know. It's funny that you brought that up, because I was thinking about that. I was like, man, how much weight is just in handles? I need to get rid of some of these handles. So, and I almost, in my panic to prepare and everything else, I was trying to find every reason to do everything else that didn't need to be done at that time, procrastinating about preparing. And I thought, well, I could build tools that I have one handle that interchanges into each of my tools, and then I could have more tools and only one handle on the airplane. But then at home, I don't want to change a handle every time I want to change a tool. I just want to grab one. So, okay, we'll try this. And it's hard on thin steel too. It works better on thicker steel, and it works better when you can see the mark. So, okay, right there. So my intention is just to drive this down until it bottoms out on the anvil, which it has. And then if the slug you're going to knock out, I can see it's not going to work well because there's a chamfer to this punch, and so I'm not going to get the slug knocked out the way I would like to. But if I can cool off just the center, which it's thinner and it should cool off faster, a little dot of water in there. I'm going to try it, but I might not make it. Okay, so knock the slug out. And it wanted to tear, and that's because there's this chamfer on the bottom of that tool, and it doesn't have a sharp edge to the bottom. I want it flat on the bottom with a sharp edge. So Tom will address his tool, and it will be better when he goes to punch holes in horseshoes. So anyways, we'll knock that off of there. And one thing, I was telling this story to a few other people. Sorry if you've heard me tell the same story, but you guys asked me the questions that I had prepared to tell you anyways. So, and then, who was it this morning said, I need to know it twice, so go ahead and, John, was it you or who was it? Somebody said, oh, there, yeah. I want to hear it now, and then I need to hear it again later because I need to be told twice. And, you know, and I hate to tell bad jokes, but you know what you tell a woman with 2 black eyes? Nothing. She's already been told twice. Okay, that's not. Maybe that's not funny, you know. And I don't. You know. Okay, but what do you call a woman who works like a man? Lazy witch. So, anyways, I do drill my holes. I don't know why I love drill presses. Probably the same reason Seth files. You know, it's just his thing. But I like drilling holes, and so I've got several drill presses. One's set up with, I believe it's a bronze brush, and it's about this big around, and it's got bristles on it about that long, and I bought it at an auction, and farmers might know better than me, but I was told it was using for cleaning grain silos and such, because it wouldn't create spark and catch a fire. So I leave that one chucked up in one drill press all the time. And then when I want to add a little color to my stuff, right out of the fire, right off the hammer, whatever, stick it underneath my brush and go ahead and add some color to my work, right? So you do the same thing with a copper brush, but I really like that bronze brush in the drill press. And then I like to leave one set up with a countersink hole in it, and then I have one I change for whatever hole I'm using, or if I'm drilling multiple holes, I have 2 with. I just don't want to change drill bits. I don't want to change handles. I don't want to change drill bits. Back to why I drill. I forged some wine glass stems. There's a photograph, I believe, in my little promotional book or whatever. And here's just a few pieces of my work. But I was making little bases, which is a lot of the same work here that I'm going to show you next. And I was making a little miniature tenon, mortise and tenon joint on the bottom and the top, and epoxying a wine glass to the top of it. And I'm trying to upset this little peen into this little wine glass, and my father was watching me struggle, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, Dad, I'm trading these wine glasses with another farrier, blacksmith, artist, tool maker, Jim Keith. He's very highly recognized and reputable guy out of New Mexico, and I needed to do it the hardest way possible." And my dad said, "Jennifer, even the blacksmith would use the most up-to-date technology available to them." So every time I go to the drill press, I think about my father, and also when I go to MIG welding, I think about my father, and go ahead and do it. I mean, sometimes it's the better way. You don't always have to do everything the hard way.
Pretty
So
much blacksmiths invented those tools.
yeah, probably, you're right, yeah. So whenever I'm going to drill holes in something, I just go ahead and throw it on the floor, let it air cool, so I don't do any of that little surface hardening or whatever, and then burn up your drill bits. But very, very good skill to learn how to sharpen a drill bit. And it's not that hard. So, you know, find the time to get somebody to instruct you on how to sharpen a drill bit. And drill bits, you don't have to buy, you go to the store now, they sell you 10 at a time the same size. Well, nobody knows how to sharpen a drill bit anymore. They just throw it away and get another one. And I can't throw anything away, and I swear to God, I'm not a hoarder. But I'm frugal, and I live in an area that doesn't have a high economy. So you can't be wasteful where I live, and I'm not. So, okay. When that's cool, we'll send somebody over to the drill press and drill me some holes in that to receive. What we'll do is go ahead and attach. We'll turn this into a coat hook. We'll attach these flowers that I had already prepared at home for it. I like layers. It was something I'd never even thought of until somebody smacked me in the face with it and said, "Layer them up," you know. And I like the depth, and I like the, you know, just all the stuff that it adds to it. And these are, I think, 3/8 rivets. It doesn't matter, whatever you got or whatever you want. And drill those holes, and then we're going to create some hooks. I can do that one next. I'll give one to James while I talk. We're going to get the other end hot. Yep. So obviously drawing a taper and creating a little curly piggy tail, whatever you call that, on the end, and making hooks is a really, you know, stylish thing, or, you know, it's got a lot of aesthetics to it. But when I was giving them to people or selling them, they were complaining that all of their coats were turning out like this in the back. And they didn't like that it needed to have a bolder, hook to it where they hung their jacket. And then, again, can't throw nothing away, and you buy something at auction, and it comes with a bucket of rusty old nails. Well, that's kind of a nice little thing. And so I don't do a lot of junk art, but I do repurpose things like this. Half of my work's already done. I already got a button on there. And then if it's somebody who comes to you, they've got an old barn they're going to take apart, and would you make something out of it? You find things that you can do. But I prefer to just start with, raw steel and go from there. But in this case, I brought, again, I could do this off of the horn, and I can do it very consistently, because that's what horseshoeing is to me, is we consistently make this variations of the same radiuses and make pairs of feet to fit together. And like I said, I don't like making tools, so here's my junk, just cobbled up whatever, but I can go ahead and consistently make the same exact with absolutely very little effort. So pop that in there, and put some of this stuff here, rivet in the pocket. A little bit more heat. So I like the pin, and I actually have it kind of set at a fork there so that I can use a wider material at the top and a narrow material at the bottom. If I do one of those little curly Q things, and sometimes I'll make it so it fits over there, and then scroll around. The trick about going around a jig is just to make sure that you stay tight, and I just use my weight for that, so leaning back around my jig and pulling it until I'm looking at this side and trying to come up with some parallel lines, and I think I'm pretty close. I did the same thing I did at home, and yeah, looks good. So I guess I should leave it here. So no problem. And then I don't cut. I picked nails that were all the same length, but if they're variational lengths, I don't cut them until I've got all those bent, and then I can go ahead and cut them off wherever I want. So super easy. I'll put those down there, and we'll move on to the flower, which is the Bliss Flower, and I start with.
Both of them or one at a time?
If you do both, then I won't talk. I'll just whack these out real quick, and try and talk a little bit on. Need some tongs? These are the ones that I like to use, and you could just hand the tongs to me if you wanted. This is a tool called an Anvil Devil. It's a very common tool amongst farriers. It's nothing but a piece of triangle, hardened steel, and we use it for marking and for also cutting. It's no different than your cutoff in your Hardy, and the reason you can use a cutoff Hardy if you wanted to. What I'm going to do is take that triangle, and I'm going to stand it up on edge. My first step is to stand it up on edge and fuller a notch into the bottom, and then I'm going to flip it over and do the opposite side and fuller a notch on the other side. And I always work in opposing sides so that I'm constantly keeping my material managed. And I'm going to turn that. Here's my storyboard for it, so I'll show you the piece. That's my butterfly. I brought a handful of these because everyone always goes, where do you get those? Well, Farrier Supplies have them. Oleo Acres, did you guys bring some?
I didn't bring any.
Oh, I should have known.
I know,
So,
sorry.
anyways, I think I have, let's see, 3, 6, 7. I have 9 or 8 here, and I'll sell them to you guys. I always bring some to sell it, and I just grab $5 off you for them. I pay like, I don't know, $3.50 plus tax or whatever, and then since you took up some of the weight in my luggage, we'll just round it to 5. I don't want to do change. And so we're going to start with that square, and the first step is going to be to notch all 4 sides in, fuller all 4 sides in. The reason I like to do that with this Anvil Devil is, let's see, Because for one, when my hammer swing comes down, this will slide around on the anvil. It will, what I'm doing with this, and I teach this to all of my, anyone who comes to my shop, I teach them how to do this, is it's a really good exercise just for learning how to swing the hammer, learn to let go of the hammer. You shouldn't have death grips on your tongs or your hammer ever, and just let it go and let it fall. And if you're a golfer, you know, you get all lined up and then you go to swing and it's way over there, or it's too close to you and you miss the ball altogether, you have to learn to adjust for your swing, right? And so I learned to adjust for my swing. And if I hit over here, the triangle or the square will tip that way. And if you do it on a hot cutoff, it'll really tip and probably go across the shop. But if I have this where it slides, I can still keep control of it, yet still recognize what my hammer blow did. And then also, farriers don't know about kiss blocks so much. I think blacksmiths understand kiss blocks. I use this as the anvil is now my kiss block. I can drive that down right until it hits the anvil and stop. And if I do that on all four sides, I know I'm equal. I'm always counting in my head. I do a lot of, that was 5 blows, turn around, 5 blows the other way, and I do a lot of counting. Are we ready? Perfect. Thank you, sir. So, again, the same thing, using my hammer to line it up, my micrometer to see the equidistance on sides, stand her up, and then just wallop it. 8. Turn it around. As it cools off, you might have to throw in that extra blow. It puckers because you've upset material through that. So flatten it out so you can get a hold of it with your tongs again. I should go to the cold side first so that I can get the work done. Flip it around. Not too bad. My hammer swing is where I want it to be. Kind of flatten it out. Now I've got that pedal shape started. And one of my mentors is a man by the name of Roy Bloom, and he's in Wisconsin. And he teaches a lot about posture and just moving material. And he has a video that's called Cow Pies and Clips, I think is the name of it. Clips is something we put on horseshoes. This is a clip. So he talks about, he goes out in his backyard behind his shop and it's pouring down rain. He's got on some rain gear and he puts a big old pile of big cow pile on his anvil, and he takes a broomstick and he whacks it with a broomstick, and what do you think happens? The cow pie goes in 2 different directions, right? And then he puts another cow pie up there, and he takes a basketball and he throws the basketball in, and what's it do? Every direction, right? So I always think about that, and so the next thing I'm going to do is take my basketball, which is the rounding side of my hammer, and I'm going to throw it at my cow pie and make that thing go like that. So that would be this step.
Ready for another one?
Sure.
Magic with your tongs.
Thank you. Twice in case you missed it the first time. Oh, that one's not quite deep. It was starting to fold on me, and I don't want it to fold because then it's not going to fuller the way I wanted it to. And one's a little shallow, so we'll go back to it. More better. So this steel that I started with is 1/4 inch by, I didn't even know, inch and a quarter by inch and a quarter, whatever, it's a square. I've tried doing it with thinner material, and all it does is taco on you. So you have to manage your heat by only having the edge that you're notching or fullering hot and cool everything else off. Otherwise it just folds on you. So that's why I use a little bit thicker. And then I like forging and I like swinging hammers, so this gives me an opportunity to swing a hammer. I don't do a ton of plasma cutting, but I do some. But I like to be able to forge material, so even if it's plasma cut or water jetted or whatever, I want it a little bit thicker because I want to be able to fuller some details or texture or whatever into it. So the next step is going to be to isolate each individual petal. And I brought primarily just farrier tools because I like to be able to teach this to farriers that they've got all the skills, they just lack a lot of ideas, and very simple farrier tools will achieve this. Okay. So now comes the basketball. Make sure I'm keeping my tongs off the anvil. So even though I'm using the basketball, if I drop my handle down here lower than the face of the anvil, now I'm starting to push material this way. I can tilt it, pull material this way, whatever. Just if I had done my demo yesterday, some of you guys might have done a little bit better in the competition last night. Just saying. It's scary to lift a hammer up this high and not hold on to it and just throw it down. And this is a project where you can really get comfortable with doing that and not worrying about where you end up hitting, because you can't really mess this up. So just hit away. Play with it. Okay, and that's what I usually do. I primarily am using a propane forge in the shop at home. I'm not finished building. I'm building a coke fire and a coal fire and a table. I'm just not done with it yet. Once you draw it down, switch to something smaller to hold on to it. I'm going to do this one. I didn't bring a cross peen, but I know there's one around here. A cross peen or a straight peen, either one. We'll just do this one a little bit different and see what happens. I'm going to first smash it down a bit with my basketball while he grabs a different hammer. And this is, part of what I like. Okay, I did it that way, I did it that way, I did it that way. What way haven't I tried yet? And just making a combination of different tools or techniques with the same thing and seeing the different outcomes from it. It don't matter. I don't really even care what it is. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So we've got a fairly round radius, but let's go ahead and maybe I should have gone the other way. Let's try it this way too. I like it this way better. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I have not done this. Clay told me not to do anything I hadn't done in before, but he didn't check with my mom, because if you tell me not to do something, I'm probably going to do it. How you doing over here?
Doing okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. I don't mind if he lets me take a break from time to time. I appreciate that, James. Are there any questions right now? So, I guess, yeah. I wish I was smart enough to explain to you, but it's if you have a 1/3, 2/3 ratio, like when you hammer the 2/3, the 1/3 becomes the 2/3, and the 2/3 becomes the 1/3, and you kind of just keep going squish, 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 and it's almost as if you give a place for the material to go. Thank you, sir. If I want more swing, step back farther away from your anvil and grab the end of your hammer handle. Okay, so I've pretty much smashed that out and no longer looks square, it's just square-ish. And I will divide and isolate each lobe or whatever into a petal. So if you have a hard time with your micrometer, give yourself some cheater lines, you know, to begin with when you do your initial notching. And that's not straight, but you could get out your ruler and all your precision tools and then go ahead and hit it with a hammer. You know, so. Put this back. Thank you, sir. So this was the one we were doing the cross peen on. To see which side I was hitting. Okay, this is my top, I guess. I guess there's a lot of efficiency in hammer control. And Seth, you asked one of the things I maybe can bring to this industry is efficiency. Farriers get paid by the horse, not by how long it takes. And so we want to get it done well in as little amount of time as possible. Okay, one lobe left. There's just one lobe left to pull around that one. Thank you, sir. Throw it on the floor, it's going to end up there anyways. Same thing as with my hot cut. Just looking at the forward, the leading edge coming to me. Because I've got different thicknesses to this thing, it likes to dance around a little bit. So now I have 4 isolated petals, and then I want to put a vein. 1 vein, 3 veins, 2 veins, curlies, dots, it doesn't matter. Play with it and see what you like. And originally, Derek's flower that he introduced to me was very flat and didn't have quite as much hammering to it, just more the fuller lines in it. And I loved it. And after I achieved it, I wanted to mimic what he did. I wanted to achieve what he had showed me, and then I wanted to play with it after that. Take it one step further, do one thing different. And that's his influence on me, but then I took it on and I kind of made it my own. and I've showed it to other people, and they've done something to it and made it their own as well.
What's the anatomy of that?
This one here, this is a fuller, and I heard somebody yesterday calling it a creaser, and I prefer to call it a fuller, but what it does is make a crease in a horseshoe. So I think that's where people call it a creaser. And so it's a lot like a butcher, where it has one edge that's straight and one edge. The question was, what's the anatomy of this tool? The other edge is got, I don't know, a radius. And for farriers, this radiused edge is, it makes a determination of how the nail fits into our horseshoe. And there's lots of different, some are sexier, straighter, curvier, or whatever. This one I like because the width of it is narrow and I can make tight turns on it. There's my other one over here. This one is same style of tool, but it's got a flatter radius to it, so it's going to make a little bit straighter of a line. This one I've allowed to get real flat and be more of a, what do you call that? Not a butcher, what do you call that when you move the material away from a line? A what? Well, like you do first pass and second pass, what's that tool called? A butcher, okay. I don't know the terminology that well. So I just left that one, and I kind of like that it gives that butcher effect into the vein or whatever I'm doing. Just adds one more little light reflection. You were talking about light reflecting, and I've never thought about flat, shiny, smooth steel reflecting light, because I think about hammer marks and all the different reflection you get out of a hammer mark. And for farriers, we don't want hammer marks in our shoes. We want them like Seth's stuff, smooth, but we don't do it. Well, we do file them if we're in competitions and stuff. We get the file out and we draw file them and all that sort of stuff. But we try and do most of the stuff off the hammer, but we don't want hammer marks in this. But I made some beam caps for a customer recently, and that was another thing about customers and clientele. I have a carpenter that I'm connected with, and it's an early relationship. I've been doing work with him for about 2 years now, and a couple times throughout the year he comes to me and he says, I'm building a house, I need these or I need that or whatever, and I love that. And he said, I need these beam caps. And thank God for phones and technology now. He took a picture of the beam and a ruler and a square up there and everything so that I had the visual. And I recreate that in my shop, and then I'm trying to figure out how am I going to make this beam cap, because it was would go around, collar around the beam that went through the center of the house, and then had to have a wing that came down and met the roof of the house. And I'm thinking, oh boy, this is over my head. But I always take jobs that are over my head. That's how I progress, and I challenge myself and learn a new technique or whatever. So I got it all figured out. Of course, you got to make these bends first. I don't even remember which way I went on it, but I got them all bent up. And he said, she wants some hammer marks in it. And I said, okay, like textured or like how many hammer marks? He said, just some hammer marks in it. Okay, so I went ahead and did, this. Knocked all the corners around everything, and then just in the construction of it, there were plenty of wax that I was throwing hammer marks in. And I thought, it's got hammer marks. Package it all up, send it off to the guy. And he says, Jennifer, she wants more hammer marks. How do you put hammer marks in that without destroying the configuration of those angles and everything? I mean, okay, I'll tell you the rest of the story because it's kind of funny, but I go back to the shop, I throw all kinds of, at least I knew how to do it the second time, because I'd already done it once. Throw all kinds of hammer marks into it and trying to maintain some stuff and tweak it all back into shape, finish it again, send it off, and I'm like, okay, now I'm on pins and needles. It's always the nervous part to me is when you deliver a project, what is the response going to be? And so I'm waiting. No, I'm telling the story right now, James. If you could just soak it for a second. I'll be quick. Okay, so I'm waiting, and I have 3 girlfriends who live within 4 or 5 miles of me, and we live in a rural area, so it's not infrequent. Well, it's not. We have happy hour at the shop, so the girls come by and we're having happy hour at the shop and having a couple beers and we're laughing and we're telling jokes. Completely laid back, no pressure kind of day, and the phone rings and it's my construction guy, and I was like, oh man, like, I've been wondering what the response was going to be, and are they going to fit and everything like that. And I thought I better take this call. So the gals are at the layout table and they're chatting away and drinking beer, and I grab my phone and I run out the back door of the shop and I said, hello? I said, Jennifer, that last job you did for me is the worst job you've ever done. And the phone goes dead. And I was like, you're freaking kidding me? Like, I mean, I'm vulnerable. I'm a vulnerable person. I'm like, my phone has gone dead, battery died. And I'm like, so I go back into the shop, plug my phone in, and I know it's going to take several minutes for that thing to get juiced up enough. And now I can't wait for these get out of my shop. These women have got to go, because I got an issue here. And in my head, they're talking about the neighborhood and what they're cooking for dinner and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, I'm going to eat this job. What am I going to tell them? How do I apologize? How do I make this right? You know, and I'm panicking in my head. And I finally get them chased out of there. And I go to the phone, and it's charged up enough. I hit the power button, and all these notifications start coming up. And I'm like, oh, God, got to call them back. Got to call. Oh, there's a message. There's a message from them. I play the message. Jennifer, I was just kidding. Are you kidding me? I mean, I was ready to puke. So, okay, now I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy did this to me. Like, we don't know each other that well. And so I called him back and I said, Chris, you be careful, because I owe you. And I had to tell him, you don't know what I just went through. I mean, I was sick about it. He said, they're perfect. She loves them. They fit great. Thank you so much. And I was like, oh my God. Anyways, all right, now I'm ready, James. Sorry.
Did you call your girlfriends back?
Oh, I did. Okay, so this one's all just fuller petals, just using a different hammer. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll use this different fuller just for fun. Tom Willoughby is a good friend of mine, and retired farrier, had back surgery, and he does a lot of creative forging, and very talented artist, draws, sings, plays guitar. This one? Yeah, okay. And Tom carves wood, everything. And one of the comments I heard him say one day was, do it bold. And so when I'm running a fuller or a chisel, I try and make sure I'm making an impression. I'm doing it bold and making it not some sort of chicken scratch on the surface, but forge it. So I got to talk about this, James.
All right.
So okay, so handled tools. One thing about a handled tool is you don't need as much material to make it. You know, if you had a straight chisel or whatever, you need enough height to keep your hand away from the fire, and then you got to wear that stupid glove and all that sort of stuff. So that's one reason I like handled tools. The other thing is it's easy to pop this off of this wood stick and go to the dresser or whatever and work both sides without this handle being interfering with your motor or whatever. And the other part of it is there's a piece of inner tube in here, rubber. All it is a piece of bicycle tube. And my kids, they never had a bike they could ride. I'd steal bike tires, and then, you know, Damascus, so I'd steal the chains off their bikes to weld together. But if you don't have a piece of inner tube that's the right diameter, just cut yourself a round disc of it. And if we had a rubber inner tube around here, I'd take this off and rehandle it if you want to. Somebody's got a bicycle. Oh, hold it here. Okay, sorry. Sorry, the question was how this is attached on, and it's got a piece of rubber inside here. If I have a round piece of rubber, I would put it between the stick and the head, and then just tap it down in through here. I get it wet, so it's got some lubricant and slip, and tap it down through until sometimes the rubber will just split, and if it doesn't, I'll take a knife and just split it, and so the rubber sucks back in there. And so I have some flexibility to that on the handle, and it stays tighter longer, and probably takes some of the shock out of the concussion of the hammer swing. Oh, somebody calling the dog, or are you calling me? Oh, okay. That's all right. Is that good for you? Okay. All right, thanks, James. I lose track of where I'm at over here. Okay. Oh, we were putting veins, I guess, in this. Farriers are pretty good about, or they should be anyways, about wire brushing. You know, Seth can get away with not wire brushing, but I use wire brush all the time and make sure that my anvil's clean and my work is clean, so I'm not driving all the slag or whatever. I guess I'm using this one on this one. Just stay with the same tools. Something else about these lines, with this radius to it, I've done them straight, and there's nothing wrong with that. This one that's on my belt buckle are just straight lines, and they go clear out to the point of the flower. These ones are got a bit of a radius to them. You can create motion with those lines, and your eye will follow those lines, just like if you're doing a scroll on a fireplace screen or whatever. You can create some motion with those lines as well. And then one thing that was in Derek's original piece, which I bought from him, holds my keys in my house, is he went around and he put a bevel on all four sides of the petals as well, just like if we were boxing a horseshoe. So the thing that all of the skills that a blacksmith have, farriers use to build horseshoes, with the exception of twisting. So of course I took a bar steel, I twisted it, forged it back into a flat piece with rolled edges and built a horseshoe out of it, just so I could use all the blacksmithing skills in a horseshoe. So anyways, it was a bar shoe too. So the same thing, if I come to the edge of my anvil, I can let the rest of the hammer that I'm not using clear down the side. My knees are bent. I'm trying not to bend my back so much. I do enough of that. Overlapping blows. Oops. So that you can see how it'll reflect the light just a little bit differently.
You want that?
I'll grab it, yeah. Thanks, James. I've gotten where I do this under the treadle hammer now, since I have a treadle hammer.
Is that a Clay Spencer influence?
Yes, absolutely. So about hammers, I didn't know a lot about hammers. I just knew that with farriers, a lot of times we compete, and I'm a competitive person. I compete in horseshoe competitions, not as much as I used to, just because I'm busy doing a lot of other things now. But part of our competitions would often be a two-person class where you would have a striker. And I never had a striker in the shop. I bribed my children, It would cost me a fortune, and I thought, man, I wish I had a striker. And so I thought, I need a power hammer. That's a striker. So I got myself a 25-pound little giant. Bought it off of Craigslist, sight unseen. Dad picked it up, delivered it to my shop. I was like, yes, I got it. I can do anything now. And then I had a blacksmith friend I was bragging to, and he said, you gonna sharpen plowshares? I said, I don't even know what a plowshare is. And he says, well, that's what those are for. Those were designed for sharpening plowshares. It's a good machine for sharpening plowshares. Dang, I want to do something else with it. So I learned how to use a hammer. And if you can't, using this hammer, if you can swing this hammer good, then when you go to that, you can have a lot more success of understanding where your material needs to be and how to work it and whatnot. And so it was a really great beginner hammer to learn how to draw material. But then I was like, okay, now I want to put a top tool in there. Well, there's no room, not enough stroke, and it's only a 25. I just couldn't do what I wanted to do. And I thought, dang, I thought that was going to end, all my problems. So then I went shopping. I waited. I knew I needed a power hammer then, and I waited, and I kept watching, and they're hard to find. They're expensive. I'm broke, and I found an auction where it was only like 3 hours from my home, and I sent an email to Dad, and he says, I'll be there in the morning, and it was my birthday. So we took off Saturday morning, drive out to this auction, and it's a 55-pound striker. If you're familiar, it looks a lot like a little Yang style hammer, and it's pristine. And I don't even know how many hours, not very many on it, and it's in the middle of this man's two-car garage. He had passed. His name was Bud, and I named my tools, so that hammer is obviously Bud. And I wore some girl clothes that day, and I kept my hands stuck in my pockets, and I stood around by that hammer with my back to it, and I'd eavesdrop on the men who would walk around it. And I was like, Dad, nobody knows what that is. I'd hear, oh, some sort of press or something, and I thought, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. And I knew what it was. I'd done all my homework. I'm a homework girl. I like to prepare, be as knowledgeable as I can heading into something, and create as little error. And I was like, nobody knows what that hammer is. And all the other guys' stuff, tongs that were beat up and crude, and hammers that were like nothing special, were going for astronomical prices. And I don't know how this is going to go. And they stopped the auction and saw that hammer right in the middle of the auction, which I thought they were going to hold out right till the end for it. And he started up at some price, and he kept coming down. Finally, at $800, I was like, are you kidding me? $800, I'm in. And the guy who bid against me showed up late, and I took a look at his hands, and he was not a blacksmith. And I thought, I don't know why he's bidding on that, but he's not going to hang in there as far as I am. I had every dime I had saved up in my pocket, and I was prepared to spend it all. And what a blessing. I was trembling. Come on, say sold, say sold, say sold. I bought that hammer for $1,600. I mean, I absolutely couldn't believe that I got that hammer bought. So then I was like, that's it. That solves all my problems. I'm good to go. And then I learned all the limitations of a power hammer. And then Clay and his influence was like, okay, got to have the treadle hammer. And the treadle hammer serves for a lot of the voids that those other two hammers don't do, but there's nothing more versatile than a friend with a sledgehammer. So I encourage you guys to work together and learn how to swing a sledgehammer. Some of you guys I wanted to stop you and help you, but I figured I had an opportunity later to sort of cover some of that stuff. So now the next thing I need to do is just give it some depth, and I use this little knockoff or whatever, came out of the scrap pile at the machine shop, and I use that as my miniature traveling swedge block. If you don't have a swedge block, it doesn't matter. You guys saw how you can, sink something in the hardy hole, and I've done these flowers in the hardy hole plenty of times. A piece of round stock forged into a circle, just as long as you have enough clearance to make a depression underneath it, chunk of wood. I used to be one of these people, I thought I had to have exactly what I saw teaching their equipment. I had to have their equipment. And then I went to a major blacksmithing or farrier competition, and the English guy, he comes out, he's like world champion. He's like the guy to beat. Tell me his name. I'm drawing a blank. From England. Not Grant, the other one. Billy Carruthers. I mean, he's all over the world. And he comes out of his hotel room with his waste paper basket and was using it for a quench bucket. And I thought, yeah, just use whatever works. You don't have to have exactly, that fancy tool or whatnot. So I'm just going to set this on top of my bowl. Immediately, you'll start to see the black ring come around, so I can tell I'm pretty well centered up. And then my center punch is, I'll put her in the center there. Give myself some depth. Not too much, because my rivet heads are only so big and my, whatnot. But you could go as far as you want to. And I encourage you to take all of these steps and take them as far as you possibly can and test the limits of them. S-curves are sexy. That's why women have them. And so we put them into our flowers as well. I originally started doing these down, and I always go back to that. But then whenever I see, there's a Tom Joyce flower over there on the wall, I think is absolutely gorgeous. And the ends on the outside flower are tipped up. And so I got to remember to try doing things the opposite way as I've been doing it. And this move here is the hammer is my power hammer coming down, and my smart hand is bending the material. So pretty easy. Okay, let me brush that up good. That one's pretty much done, except punching or drilling a hole. If you're going to punch the hole after you've put some shape to it, let's see, how would that work? You're going to flatten it out and then shear the material through. If you punch the hole first and then bowl it, your hole's going to stretch, so you may have to change the size of the rivet that you're going to use. Yep, thank you, sir. Let's see where I'm at on this one either. Okay, back to my bowl. I'll do this one the other way, it's the exact same starting materials, it's the exact same technique, just a little change to them. I don't know if I like that at all. Maybe it belongs someplace else, but anyways. It's opening, yeah. So when it's the exact same piece of starting material. This one, you can't see it so well probably on that camera, but there's a little bit of texturing because I used that cross-peen hammer. But it's interesting the different varieties you can get with very little difference at all. So then, that's a 4-petaled flower, and I was like, man, you're supposed to do things in odd numbers, 3s and 5s, and I'm stuck with this 4 because I got a square. So then I started thinking, this belt buckle, I can make 8 sides if I just turn it into an octagon. So I was doing just exactly what you guys were doing last night by hitting my corners. The hammer is forging the top, the anvil is forging the bottom, and then we know that the hammer will do more work than the anvil does, and the difference in that and the anvils makes a big difference too. Some anvils will do more work than other anvils will. And the hay button is one of them that has some sort of rebound or reaction force. I can't explain that either, but some farriers were talking about it, and I was grateful I had a hay button anvil. So anyways, octagon. And then I like forging, so you can go ahead and forge octagons, or you can go ahead and get yourself octagon shape, or this is a 6-sided shape. And when you notch a 6-sided shape, then you just create more petals. And then I wanted to do that 5-petal thing, so we'll do this. That one's a little wedge shape. And all this is round bar that I just go to the bandsaw and slice myself pieces of biscuits out of it. And so we'll do a round one now, James. And so I really only need one edge hot.
Okay, whenever you get a certain point, we need to take a break.
Oh, okay.
Take a break now?
If you want me to take a break now, that's fine.
If there's a better stopping point for you, that's fine.
If I could just whack out this round and just demonstrate how I do it, I don't even have to finish it, but show you how it's laid out anyways, and then we'll take a break. So in order to get a round 5-petal thing, there are all sorts of math people who are smart enough to figure out how to divide a circle into 5s. There's some sort of, 72 degrees? I have no idea what you're talking about. So, but when I was trying to do...
Degree of pivot on a Harley V-twin.
Now I know what you're talking about. So,
Which is 2 cylinders of a 5-cylinder radial engine.
now I know nothing about what you're talking about. I ride it. I don't work on it. So, anyways, if you Google my father provided me, my dad fills me in blanks, all kinds of stuff, information I don't know I need to know. And one of them is how to divide a circle. And if you Google how to divide circles, you can find out how to divide it into 3s and 4s and 5s and 6s and 7s and 8s and whatever. And there's different mathematical figures. In order to do 3, pretty easy. You take your round circle, and from the center, you measure your radius, and you go out to that radius and you make a mark. And then that distance there, you swing an arc and you make a mark there, and you swing an arc and you make a mark there, and then you go from your original spot the opposite way and you make a mark there, and these 3 spots should be equal distance to each other. And that's how I did this table. This was an end table with 3 legs. I did it for a class, and I was trying to minimize the amount of material and projects and steps and whatever because we only had so much time. So in order to make a 5-petal flower, I was like, okay, I'll make a mark about 10 o'clock, and I'll make a mark about 2 o'clock, and then this is real easy to eyeball halvesies there, and then it doesn't seem so hard to figure out how to get this one into thirds. And I don't mark the steel, I just come out of the fire and do my fullers the same way as I did on the squares. And when I'm doing it in propane forge at home, and I'll probably use a quench bucket here too, if I go up on my Anvil Devil and start my fullering in and whacking on this side, I distort the shape of my, maybe try it, see what happens when you wreck it. And then, so I would quench the side I'm going to hit. And so it takes a little bit longer process to go all the way around and hit all 5 of my fullers in. But then I had a 5-petaled flower, which was what I was trying to achieve. So I'll just try and do this real quick, and then we'll take a break. I don't know what I was using for tongs. You got a pair over here? Yeah, well, this one will work. Are we good?
Well, however hot you want it.
Okay. I only want one edge of it hot, so we'll take advantage of the hot side. Nice fire. So I'm going to use the hottest side, but go ahead and get a quench in here. So it takes a little extra time doing that, but we'll go a little farther. Okay, so my notch is at 2 o'clock or 10 o'clock, so we're going to get a heat over here at 2 o'clock.
Jennifer, you were talking about efficiency in your shop. Do you have something to hold your tools up at hand height so they're easy to grab, or does everything end up on the floor while you're working?
I should have taken a picture of my shop. I know Seth did. I didn't put one in my slideshow, but my anvil sets here. My forge is behind my shoulder here because when I turn, I'm reaching, let's see, which way I reach here into the fire, and then I have a wall right here, and all my tools are hung on a wall, just on little S-hooks that I can see where they are. And then all my hammers are lined up in order. Don't mess them up. Smallest to largest. The tongs too. The tongs drive me nuts because I know exactly where on that rack the 1/4 inch are, and if they're at the wrong end, oh, I get agitated because I'm losing heat. I want my tools to be right where I want them to be and be able to grab them without looking. So really close proximity. I don't have my vise locked down to the floor or to something solid yet, and I tend to roll it. It's on a steel base, and I roll it all over the shop. But now I've got 3 different vices, and so I've got enough now that I can have one that's mobile, one that's locked to something solid, and whatever. I also have a step vise, which is the handiest dang thing in the world. Clay just got one in his shop now recently too. It was a handle style that works on springs, and his has independent jaws, so you can put 2 different thicknesses of steel in there, and it still holds it tight. We need to get some cold here. So that's 10. 2 is going to be right in here. And I can go ahead and sneak in my 3rd one in between those. And then I need to divide these into 2. I might have one little wimpy pedal in there, but that's the nice thing about floral stuff is the mistakes look intentional. Nothing is quite perfect. So then I'd build these flowers, and I love these flowers. I build lots of them. I did a demonstration in Virginia in June, and I build lamps, and you'll see some photographs of those. And they wanted me to build a lamp for the demo, and I said, I can't. It's a 2-day project. Well, can you bring one with you then for our auction? So I did, and I thought, well, I'll decorate the lamp with flowers. And I Googled that Virginia state flower was a dogwood. And so I thought, well, that's a pretty easy flower to just modify from the flower I've already been building, and did a lot of homework studying what dogwood flowers look like, and that it's sort of an onion vein going through it, and it's kind of got this butt cheeky thing going on the end of the petals that swoops down, sort of makes a funnely shape to it, and otherwise same thing I've been doing. So in order to make the dogwood, when I do that initial fullering on all 4 sides, I also just gave myself a flat side on the corners and did a little fuller into those corners, which then becomes that little butt shape. And then really moving my material, pushing it this way and this way, trying to accentuate those fuller grooves to come up with the dogwood. And then I thought I'd be brilliant, and I'd do it for you guys with your state flower, and that dogwood is an amazing flower. And I thought I had it. I was like, oh, it's the same as the dogwood flower, only instead of that funnel shape being at the end, it needs to be at the center, and now I get to put 2 layers together, and that'll be really cool. And it's got these funny pointy things that come out the back, and I couldn't really figure out what they were or where they came from. And so as I'm Googling and doing all my homework on the computer, finally, and I do this a lot, is I look for pencil sketches and people actually pencil sketching it, because I can see how they build the petal by the way they draw it. And so that funnel thing that you guys have on that dogwood becomes that, whatever it is, that long pointy thing that comes off the back, the columbine. And then I was like, oh yeah, I got 2 days. I can't do that in 2 days. So thank you. Okay, we need to get that side cold now so I can hit it. Okay, so now I have 5 individual petals. This one got a little bit small. I should have crammed it over a little bit. But when you practice it and you keep repeating it and you keep doing it, they just keep getting better all the while. And then you continue just like you did with the other flowers. So we'll take a break at this point and let you guys stretch, get a drink, go potty. Thank you very much.